All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this Advanced School Politics workshop, where we will be going over how to write a campaign plan. Now, before we get started, I would like to highlight some of the schools that the Advanced School Politics Department and other teams across the Leadership Institute are hosting. First, we have the Conservative Organizational Entrepreneurship School, which, Rick, do you mind? Rick? We will get to that slide in just a moment. But we have our Conservative Organizational Entrepreneur School, which will be March 23rd to March 24th. There's a barcode at the bottom if you'd like to learn more information, as well as register. And then finally, we have our Campaign Leadership College, will be June 19th to June 28th, 2026 in the DMV metro area. This will be an application-based process, so you will submit an application for a scholarship and we will review it and let you know. But we are so excited to host another program. We just concluded our last CLC over this past weekend. We had 33 graduates from across the United States as well as international, and it was a fantastic program. And make sure to check out our social media platforms and our LinkedIn to see more information on that. There will be the link tree that Emily will post in the chat if you'd like to see more. Up next, we have our California team that is hosting Electech from April 1st to April 2nd. This is the barcode for that as well, if you'd like to sign up. This will go over every campaign technology that is current, that has been a disruption to campaigns, and everything that focuses on modern campaign technology. I highly recommend it if you want to go. It is a great program, and you will get to meet a lot of CLC alumni as well to get more information about the program from students. Finally, we do have the International School of Fundraising. Unfortunately, the registration is paused for the time being due to international conflicts, but we will let you all know as soon as possible when this is back open for registration. With that all being said, I'd like to introduce you to the Director of the Advanced School Politics, Rick Tyler, on how to write a campaign plan.
Thank you, Eiley. Good morning, everyone. We're going to take about an hour. For the next hour, we're going to go through how to write a political campaign plan. I will note that this is exactly what we do at the Campaign Leadership College over the course of 9 days, but you're going to get it all in about 60 minutes. Not in depth, but you'll get an idea of what is required to write a campaign plan and be well on the way on how to do it. So let's get started. This is me. I am the director of the Advanced School of Politics at the Leadership Institute. I have been a NBC News political contributor for about 9 years. I was communications director for Ted Cruz's 2016 campaign. And I was press secretary for about a decade for former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. So the first thing is, why do we need a campaign plan? And the campaign plan is going to provide you with a direction. It's going to keep everybody in your team going in the same direction, so people aren't sort of ad hoc trying to figure out what to do. It also helps you be disciplined about your financial plan, because a campaign plan has to have a budget, and revenue goes toward the activity of which you plan for. And so it keeps people from wanting to spend money on things that are unnecessary or aren't in the plan, and it gets everybody on the same page. So it provides discipline, financial balance, and direction for the campaign. You really need, and every candidate should insist on a written plan. Without one, you're really planning to fail. So make sure that you have a campaign plan, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, is how to put this campaign plan together. So first, there are 8 elements. And by the way, I'll say out from the outset, there are lots of ways to write a campaign plan. This is my way, and this is what we teach at the Leadership Institute, so I think it's the best way. We've had a lot of input on different ways of doing it to make sure that all the right elements are here. And so it really goes in this order. It starts with research of the district issues and the candidates, and then it goes to calculating your vote goals, then deciding on a strategy, and then who are we going to actually target? Who are we going to actually try to speak to? And notice that messaging is number 5, because without research, vote goals, strategy, and targeting, we don't know what our message is going to be exactly. We think we do, but unless we go through these first 4 steps, we're not really going to know what our messaging is. And then how do we put the organization together that's actually going to deliver that message? And of course, we've got to have resources, so we got to have a budget for how this message delivery system is going to get resourced. And then, of course, finally, we're going to have to pay for it all, so we're going to have a finance plan. So let's go through those elements. First, effective research. Research systematically analyzes the district, the people who live there, the concerns, their concerns, the issues. I don't like the word issues in campaigns. I think we should talk about problems, because people don't talk about their issues, they talk about their problems. What is the past election data, so we can get sort of an insight as to what this district is like and how they vote and what messages they actually respond to. And then finally, the strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities of all the candidates involved, including the challenger or the incumbent, so both sides. And as a candidate, you should insist that there's some research done on yourself, because we need to know what your vulnerabilities are so we can prepare in advance how to respond to them. So there are 3 main core areas of research. The first is the district itself. What are the demographics of the district? What is the geography, and what is the voter competition? So in that, you're going to find things like how old, what is the average age groups that live in the district, because those age groups are going to tell you really important information about the voter. We know that people who are older are going to be more concerned with health care, for instance, and people who are young families with children are going to be very concerned with education and also crime. They want to know that their communities are safe. We want to know how many people are married versus how many people are single. We want to know the breakdown of the ethnic and race composition of the district. So we want to know who are the major employers, where do people work, how much do they make. All of this formulates a composite of the district to help you really understand who the people are that live in this district. And they may be like you, and they may not be like you. But you're only going to find that out when you actually go and discover who the people are, what they care about, and the history of the district. One thing that's interesting about politics always is, what is the history of the district? Who settled there? When was it settled? How did it come about? All of these things make interesting campaign stump speech material, because people want to know about where they live and who they are and what their identity as a regional group is. And all that can be really very, very, very fascinating. So we want to do a lot of research on the district. Second, and I mentioned issues, but there it is, but let's think about it as problems. What are the local priorities, local problems? What do voters care about? Are they concerned with traffic? Are they concerned with low-paying jobs or lack of opportunity? Are they concerned with affordability, rising costs? Are they now concerned with rising gasoline prices? What is the political environment? And it's really important to assess that political environment well before we start out, because we don't want to sound tone deaf when we go out and speak to voters or speak on the campaign trail. If you're not talking about the things they care about, and you think you're talking about the things that they care about, but you're only talking about the things that you care about, you're not going to be able to connect with the voter. And then the third part is candidates, which is the vulnerability assessment, both on you as a candidate, or your candidate, and the opposition. What is their voting record? What are their public statements? What is their background? What is their history? What have they done, both positive and negative? You want to know both the positive and the negative about your candidate, so you can formulate a strategy against that candidate who you're running against. So I talked about some of this, the district overview, the map of the district. Of course, you want to know the district lines and the boundaries so you know where to campaign. So if there's a football game in your area and you go to the football game and neither team is in your district, then that would not be a good place for you to be campaigning. However, if one team or the other or both are in your district, then that'd be a great place to be seen. Demographics of the district, so the age, the marital status, race, ethnicity, average income, major employers, how people make their living. Understanding these demographics shapes every aspect of your campaign and your messaging, because Different people from different backgrounds care about different things. They talk about it with themselves in different ways, and you need to really have a comprehensive understanding of your district and who the voters are that live there. Research also includes critical assumptions, right? So what assumptions can we make about that will impact your campaign? What is the political environment? Well, we live in a very volatile political environment today, I would say right now. Because while the economy seems to be good for some, it doesn't seem to be good for others. The affordability issue is still at an all-time high, and people don't often just blame the last politician. They're going to fire the politician who is currently running. So if the political environment or people are having trouble with affordability, you need to be aware of that. And then ask yourself, do you think this will be a good year or a bad year for your candidate's party? Now, can that change? Absolutely it can. That's what a campaign is all about. But you need to go into it understanding what people think about your candidate's party or the other candidate's party. And is there a candidate at the top of the ticket that will help or hurt you? We don't have a presidential race at the top of the ticket in this cycle, but perhaps there's a governor's race. Perhaps there's a U.S. Senate race that people are looking to, or perhaps the top of the ticket in your district is a congressional race, and it most certainly is if you don't have the other two. And then what are those issues of local importance? How are you addressing them? What issues that are currently going on that will help or hurt you, and that you formulate a response to those? What is the voter intensity? In other words, who is motivated to vote and who is not motivated to vote. So if your party is not motivated to vote, how are you going to get them to be motivated to vote? And if the other side is very motivated to vote, you're going to have to counteract that. So what is the likely turnout? We can calculate that based on previous elections and like years. We would not compare a presidential year to a non-presidential year, which we're in now. We would go back 4 years and look at that race and see what the turnout is. And then we'll have to make some assumptions. Do we think it's going to be the same? Do we think it's going to be less? Or do we think it's going to be more? Or do we think our party is going to be less, but their party is going to be more? So we really have to calculate what those assumptions are, because that is going to affect your messaging. If you have more people in your party that are less motivated to turn out, your messaging has to do something to counteract that. And what else is on the ballot? Perhaps there's a ballot initiative, or again, the top of the ticket. This is going to affect how people turn out, and how do you align with what else is on the ballot. Sometimes there's a bond issue, sometimes there's a statewide referendum issue, et cetera. So you want to have a comprehensive understanding of all of these critical assumptions while you're doing your planning. And finally, the third part of research is candidates. So you want to do a vulnerability assessment on yourself. You want to do opposition research on your opponent, and that includes your opponent's record. If they're an elected official, what have they voted on? Have they voted for tax increases? Have they voted on things that will curtail people's freedom? What are their positions? What are their public stated records? Also, things in their personal life. Do they own a business? Do they pay their taxes? Have they filed for bankruptcy? Is there any court adjudications against them? All of these things you want to know. And then you will know how to use them in a campaign. Opposition research isn't for just understanding all the terrible things that your opponent did and then handing it to the press. That won't work. But if somebody says, they're a really good steward of tax dollars, and they're out to protect the tax dollar, and then you discover they're just raising taxes and spending it on programs that don't work, well, that's out of sync with what they're saying. In those cases, I let people have as much rope as they want, and at some point, I'm going to pull the rope tight, because once people, the most effective way to counter what the opponent thinks his strengths are is to prove otherwise. And that is, you say you care about people keeping their own money, except you've raised taxes 6 times. And you wait until they've established that that's what they want to do or run on, and then you bring the record to light. And that has a much more dramatic effect than at the beginning. And once you do that and it's effective, they're not likely to go out and talk about their tax record or their record on protecting taxpayer funds anymore, because you've made it too painful for them to do that. And then we want to talk about message development. And we're going to use our research, both from the demographics of our district and what the candidate has voted, stands for and voted for and against. And then we're going to have develop a rapid response team so that everything something campaign, you have to have kinetics in a campaign. Modern campaign with speed, and news cycles go so quickly, and there's so much competing as possible. Next, I want to talk quickly about vote. Are how many votes you're going to need in each one of your precincts, and you really need that exact number in each of the precincts, because if you don't, you really don't have a plan to get them. And hope is not a plan. Hoping that you get 50% plus to win your race is not really a good plan. Knowing exactly how many votes you need and from where will tell you on election night whether you're winning or losing, because you've already identified the persuadable voter segments. Persuadables are people who sometimes vote for one party or sometimes vote for the other party, and sometimes they don't vote at all. And you need to identify where those people live. Now, you can't identify unless you use sophisticated data modeling, which is possible, to sort of get a profile, but it's still a guess. But I can tell you where persuadable voters live by percentage of voters that live in that precinct, because we do have access to how that precinct voted in the past, even though I don't know what the individuals are. So, in other words, we're using the persuadable, identifying swing districts to help us spend our resources and time effectively. We don't want to go to districts that are already going to vote for us. We don't want to spend a lot of time there because those people are already voting for us. So there's nothing you can do to persuade them. And then similarly, we don't want to go to a district that's going to vote against us because there's nothing that you can do that's going to persuade them. We want to look for districts and precincts that we can go into where our likelihood of meeting somebody who would vote for you if they just met you and understood who you are, they like you, and they know what you're about. Those are the people we're going to focus most of our resources on, because like I said, 20% are going to vote against you, 20% are always going to vote for you, and it's really the vote in the middle. And I don't mean ideologically in the middle, but between those two people who've made up their minds, there are voters who haven't made up their mind, and I want you to meet them. And the way to meet them is to know where they live and how are we going to allocate resources against them, and not just the candidate's time, but also direct mail, our digital advertising, being present in the district, door knocking. All of those come from understanding your district and having vote goals. Now, let me just say other thing about vote goals is that sometimes we have a tendency to say, well, this district never votes for us, so I'm not going to worry about that district. Well, you do have vote goals in that district, and so even though the vote goal in that district might be low, you got to make sure that someone is responsible for at least getting that number of votes out there. Yes, you will still lose that district in all likelihood, but those votes still count toward your overall goal. And then in the districts that we always win, we're not going to spend as much time or resources there, but we still have to have a goal of motivating people to get out to vote. So, if for districts that are likely to support your candidacy, you can campaign there early, but you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can just be in the district and remind people that you're the conservative in the race. And you're running, and then at the end to remind those same people to get out to vote. But between those two, the early campaigning to your base and getting the base out to vote, you're looking for the persuadable people who could vote for you if they met you, liked you, and liked your message. So calculating the vote goals is based on a turnout prediction. So most of this is science and math. You can look up the voter history. You can see who voted where, but then you got to make a prediction, as I mentioned before, about what percentage of voters are actually going to turn out. So what you do is you try to find a model race, and that model race is likely the governor, a U.S. Senate race, a congressional race, some statewide race, not a local race. Sometimes we only have the choice to use a local race, but it's better if it's a bigger race, the presidential race, the U.S. Senate race, the governor's race. And we were looking for one of those candidates who won in your district. And then we want to calculate, we want to take all of those numbers that that person won. We're looking for what I call the attractive race, the candidate at a statewide level who won your district better than anybody else. That's your attractive race. And we'll call that person your big brother or your big sister. And you want to be like your big brother or big sister. You want to do exactly how they did in the district. And if you do, you'll win. So what you want to do is calculate what percentage of voter contribution in each of your precincts contributed to their win. And then if you take your voter registration and you take the turnout, right? So your voter registration times your turnout. You've got to make a prediction on the turnout. Maybe it'll be like 4 years ago, maybe it'll a little bit more, a little bit less. But take that prediction and multiply it by the percentage of vote contribution in each of the precincts of your big brother. So whatever percentage that contributed to their overall vote in one district, if you have a lot of districts, then that percentage will be really, really low. If you have a few districts, it'll be higher. And then you want to multiply that percentage of vote contribution to their overall total by your predicted turnout. And that will give you your vote goal. That will tell you exactly how many votes you need in this year to win, just like your big brother or your big sister. Now, I know it's hard to understand maybe if I'm just explaining that and you're like the guy at the chalkboard here, this is very complicated, but I've built a calculator to help you do this, and we're going to offer that calculator to you. It comes in an Excel spreadsheet. All the formulas are already written out, and you just follow the instructions of the spreadsheet and to paste in your big brother race, and it will calculate your vote goals for you. You can get that in a share folder that we've created, and Emily will put that in the chat, and you can click on that and you can download, three things, and you're going to see all things in this presentation. Your vote goal calculator, which I just talked about, your swing vote calculator, so you know where to spend the most time and resources, and your political budget. These are all Excel spreadsheets. All the formulas are written for you. You just plug in the numbers, and it will tell you what your vote goals are. It'll tell you where your swing voters are, and then in the political, it's a third spread. These are three separate spreadsheets. The third one is your political budget, and it'll tell you about your cash flow and if you're going to run out of money, and I'll show you that at the very end. Okay, so next we want to talk about strategy and critical decisions. So what is a strategy? A strategy is a set of strategic goals all taken together produces a victory. Strategy goals are based on the conditions of the race and what is necessary to win. It's a list of goals to reach the goal of winning the race. So people often get confused about what strategy is. It's maybe more important to talk about what it's not. Okay, so what is not strategy is I'm going to send a lot of mail. That's a tactic. Now, that may fulfill a strategy wonderfully, but it is not a strategy. I'm going to post a lot of social media. That is not a strategy. That's posting a lot of social media. Opposition research, campaign headquarters. I'm going to have a campaign headquarters. It's downtown to be visible. Everybody will vote for me. Well, having a campaign headquarters is a tactic. It's not a strategy. So if you want to drive up, so let's look at name recognition as a strategy. If I could drive my name recognition to 70%, then most people would vote for me. And it is true, more people will vote for people who they know their name than don't. And so if I were to drive up my name recognition, because I don't really have good name recognition in my district, there are tactics that will help me do that. The first is yard signs with a large name, and get that out there, and people will see the name, and then they'll learn your name. A mail program where you're sending snail mail to people about your campaign. It has your name on it, and so a billboard program. But I also suggest simpler things like introducing yourself to everybody that you meet. Wearing a name tag if you're a candidate so that people can see and remember your name. They can't vote for you if they don't know your name. So it's really important that people know your name. And so for that, a strategy is the tactics for that strategy are these items that I just mentioned. All right. So based on your assumptions, what imperatives must you accomplish to win? So we have strategic imperatives, which groups do I have to win? So I have to turn out my base. I've got to win a certain part of the persuadables, but maybe there's a large Hispanic population in your district. Do you have the right messaging to win those voters over? Maybe there's a lot of people in the workforce. Maybe there are a lot of parents. Maybe there are a lot of seniors in the district. Maybe there are all different kinds of groups. So you really want to, you can't target everybody. So you got to pick who you want to turn out, and with some specificity. In other words, targeting women would not be a good strategic imperative because it's too big and it's too spread out, and most women don't agree on all things, as we know. So that targeting them, but if you targeted retired women who are married, that's a very specific group, and I can talk about a lot of issues with them specifically. Or similarly, a woman, single moms who are raising kids, that would be I could talk to them about very specific issues. So whatever your coalition group is, narrow it down to where you say, I could talk to them about these things that they really care about. People raising families, people who are near or below the poverty line, people who are saving for retirement or a first home, people who are looking for the next opportunity, the next job. So what are those specific coalition groups? What is my message to them? We want to use key contrast, and I'll talk about the Leesburg grid in a moment. The reason we talk about contrast so much in all of these schools is because if you don't have a contrast, you really don't have a campaign. An election is a choice. People are making a choice between you and somebody else, and they need to know what that choice is all about. And if there is no choice, or they don't understand the choice, they will always invariably choose the incumbent. Or if it's an open seat and they don't see the difference, they're going to choose the person with the most name ID, the people who've invested the most in their get out the vote effort. But if you frame a choice, then the campaign is centered on that choice, and then people say, I want that choice. So simple example would be my opponent who's in office has raised taxes 6 times in his tenure on the city council. Now, if you would like your taxes raised 7 times, well, you can vote for my candidate. But I promise I'll never raise your taxes. I signed Grover Norquist's Americans for Tax Reform pledge that says as long as I'm in office, I will never raise your net taxes. And so that provides a clear choice. If you don't want your taxes raised, vote for me. If you would like your taxes raised, vote for my opponent. Now people have a choice. They understand what the choice is all about. And then, so take these contrasts and create the foundation of your messaging campaign. You can run on 3 separate issues, but it's best to run on one. If you have one that the community really cares about and they really want to change, then I would run on that one issue. However, sometimes you have to run on 2 issues or 3 issues, and that's fine. Just don't run on 4 issues or 5 issues. Now, an issue will have a lot of subparts. So if you're running on safe streets or crime, then there's a lot of issues underneath that. The judicial system, the probation system, the policing system, the court system. There are a lot of issues that come under that. Healthcare. I want to make sure people have access to quality care. There's all kinds of issues that come under healthcare. So prescription medications, access to doctors, emergency rooms, neonatal care, trauma center. I mean, it's on and on. There's lots of things to be talked about in that issue. So, but just make sure you have a large enough thematic issue. But if you're running in a local race, then your issue might be speed bumps, or it could be lighting on Main Street. It could be very simple things. Just understand that you have to be good on that issue, your opponent has to be bad on an issue, and the voters have to want to change or want to see your change or your vision of change for that issue. So that's how messaging works. And I'm just going to go into this Leesburg grid. So on the right here, you just see 4 blocks, right? And you can do this on a piece of paper. You want to get a small team together, and you want to go through this exercise. In the upper left-hand corner, you want how do you want voters perceive you? What are they going to say about you? And there's no issues here. They want to say you're smart, you're caring, you're engaged, you're friendly. You work hard, you're hardworking. These are the kind of things, not issues, but these types of things. And you want to break it down to 3 issues or 3 things that people can positively say about you. But there's a catch. It has to be in contrast to your opponent. So if you're honest, your opponent must be dishonest. And you must be able to back it up. You can't just claim your opponent's dishonest. You got to have the receipts. You got to have the goods. So if if you're honest, your opponent's dishonest. If you're relatable, then your opponent must be out of touch. And that needs to be the perceived idea. So the idea here is it has to be negative and your opponent's block. That's the upper right-hand corner, you and your opponent. But it has to be believable. If you're just saying things about your opponent and nobody believes them, you'll just lose credibility. So you want to know, what is it I want people to think about me? And is that the opposite of what I want people to think about my opponent? And when you do that successfully, then all you're doing is speaking above the line here about you on you and your opponent. Your opponent is doing this also, and he's talking above the line, but here we have it demonstrated in the bottom of the line. So that's your opponent on you. What is your opponent going to say about you? And what does your opponent want people to think or feel about them? And they focus their messaging on this. And if you don't go through this process, I guarantee you, in some level, your opponents are doing this to you. So you want to be able to go through this exercise and make sure that your messaging fits this grid. That, one, what do I want voters to feel about me? What do I want them to feel about the opponent? And then to understand what the opponent is trying to characterize you as and what they want to say about themselves. Now, sometimes your strongest message is also your biggest vulnerability. So, for instance, former state U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who I worked for in the presidential campaign, his moniker, if you will, was Trust Ted. Trusted. And that was very powerful. People believed that. People did trust Ted. Right up until Donald Trump made it, Lion Ted, and Donald Trump won that argument. He understood that he needed to destroy that trusted imagery that Ted had. And that's just an example of how this works. So if your opponent has something, they're saying, I'm a defender of the taxpayer, I care about the taxpayer, and you can demonstrate they don't, that is their biggest vulnerability. All right, so we need to locate the people. What message are we going to deliver to them? And then the vehicle, how are we going to deliver to them? Is it going to be direct mail? Is it going to be television advertising, which is really expensive? Or is it going to be radio advertising? Are we going to do it just door to door? Or are we going to do a combination of these things? So we got to locate the voters, the persuadable voters. What are we going to say to them? And then how are we going to get that message into their ears or their eyes? So these are the things you really have to think about, and you have to think about, how do I locate these groups, and through what means am I going to communicate with them? Now, once you do that, we can talk about organization. So now all we've done now is we've done the research, we know our district, we've done our messaging, we know what we want to say about our opponent and ourselves, and we're guessing what our opponent wants to say about us. We've established our vote goals. Now we need the people in our organization, our campaign, to make all these things happen. And so you should use an org chart. In campaigns, there must be a hierarchy. Somebody has to be in charge, and the candidate really is in charge. It's their name, honor, that's on the ballot. And so they must be in charge. Now, they might put a campaign manager in charge, and then everybody reports to them. But you can't have people freelancing, and there has to be discipline. So people have to report up the chain of command, from the field staff, people knocking on the doors, to the field director, if you have one, up to the campaign manager, up to the candidate. But it also should work the other way around. The candidate should know what's being said at the doors, because in most campaigns, the people knocking on the doors have the best information, because after all, they're talking to the voters that actually live in the district, and they're hearing what they care about. So there should be a reporting mechanism from the field staff who are knocking on doors up the chain of command into the ears of the candidate and the campaign manager, so they understand what people are saying and feeling about that. So if you have a small campaign, your campaign manager might take on many roles. They could be the finance chairman, they could be the communications director, the campaign manager. Sometimes a candidate will play all these roles, but I don't recommend it, because what a candidate needs to do is stay on the messaging side of the campaign, and then they need somebody else to stay on the mechanical side of the campaign. If you have a large campaign, like a congressional campaign, then you have the potential to hire a lot of people because there's a lot of money involved. So you would have a campaign manager, a communications director, maybe a deputy communications director, maybe a political director, maybe an assistant political director, a scheduler, a body man or gal, which is someone who travels with the candidate all the time. That's a very important role. To field staff, to door knockers, to speech writers. There's all kinds of people, to security. There's all kinds of people that can be hired. But I suspect in most smaller campaigns, you can have the candidate and maybe a campaign manager who's going to double as a lot of those other roles, or maybe you have 2 or 3 people who could be on the payroll depending on the size of your campaign. So political campaigns basically break down in the organization chart in 3 large areas. Development, that's where the money comes from to raise the money, and they're also responsible for compliance with whatever state agency, local agency, or if you're running for president or Congress, federal agency, to make sure that you're reporting all your activities, all the money that you're legally compelled to do. The second is political, that they're involved in strategy, research, data, polling, the field operation. They're the ones who are actually delivering and deciding how to deliver the message. And then there's the business side of the campaign, which is managing payroll, making sure everybody gets paid, paying vendors, scheduling the candidate, making sure all the logistics are done, setting up events, breaking them down, making sure the yard signs get out. Well, they would get them to the political people to actually put them out, but when are they going to be purchased? All of these things. So we have development, political, and business part of the campaign. And they kind of overlap this way. So you have a fundraising represented by green, and so they're involved in compliance, raising money, and they also do events. And then you have the political, which is data research, ballot access, getting on the ballot, communications, policy, field ops, and paid media. And then on the business end, you have HR, who's going to pay all these people on your campaign, who's going to pay all the vendors, and also that has to be reported to fundraising for financial compliance. So there's a lot of overlap, and the management really is right in the center of it, making sure that all these 3 areas function the best that they can. And it is really here that building systems that work will save you a lot of effort, because if you're adding people and your systems don't work, then you're just adding to the chaos. You got to have systems that work, and I'll talk about that a little later. So now we want to talk about budgeting, and this is how we're going to allocate resources. And there are 2 top parts of a budget. One is the administrative budget, or you can think about it as the administrative budget is everything that isn't voter contact. Voter contact would be door to door, the door knockers, the brochures, excuse me, that we leave behind. But instead, this is everything that's essentially not advertising, okay? And you want to make sure that your administrative budget and your voter contact budget are aligned, and I'll talk about that in a second. The second is the voter contact budget, and these are itemized by time and by type and timeline. So type would be what kind of media we're advertising in, and the timeline, when are we going to communicate through these vehicles, and how much will they cost? So we have broadcast cable, satellite, over-the-top advertising, which is digital advertising like pre-roll videos, radio, direct mail, door-to-door signs, billboards, and newspapers. Although weeklies are better, dailies are almost never a good buy. Billboards aren't really a good buy either, but it depends on the district. Okay, so then we're going to talk about, well, let me just say a couple things about voter contact budget. Your voter contact budget should be no less than 70% of your total budget. That is, every 7 cents of the dollars being spent on contacting, communicating your message to the voter, and helping them understand what the choice in the election is all about. So therefore, it corresponds that your administrative budget should be no more than 30%. And it is ideal if you can get closer to 80-20. Now, in very large campaigns, it is much easier for them to get to 80/20 because there's so much money involved and there's only so many people you can hire. In smaller campaigns, it's much tougher because a disproportionate amount is going to go toward salary or payroll and other things that just cost more as a percentage of your overall fundraising. So ideally, 80/20. Worst case, 70/30. There are some cases where you could have a bigger administrative budget because maybe you hire a finance director, something like that. But they should be in that zone. Otherwise, your warning signs really, if it gets below that, should really be going off. Okay, so now we got to pay for everything. So each fundraising investment has distinct advantage costs and requirements that your campaign should select a strategic mix of fundraising, of sources of revenue that are going to come to your campaign. So we want to have a finance plan. Now, I've included this document. You'll notice in your share folder that Emily will share the link to folder so you can actually download this budget. And what it has is a budget summary, which is the tab before the one we're on now, an administrative budget, the voter contact budget detail, and then the finance plan. For two, so you're just the one administrator and staff. And this would be a or a school board race. You wouldn't hire all of these people. So in this example, I have a pretty small campaign, and so I've hired a campaign manager, which is about $2,000 a month, and then I'm paying them $2,500, and toward the end, I'm paying them a little more. And I also have a body guy or gal, and that is someone who's traveling with the campaign to make their travels easier, more effective, and that's somebody who's collecting business cards, writing down the issues that people are talking about on those business cards, who is he's giving this to political so they can follow up on all of the communication that the candidate is having with voters. There's nothing more effective than having a conversation with a voter and then getting an email about that conversation that you had with the candidate later on, meaning they thought about it and it was very important. And you can do that if you systematize it with a body guy or a gal. The body guy or gal is responsible for a lot more too, like making sure the candidate gets safely from one place to another, making sure that they get rested, making sure that they eat, making sure knowing where the next available bathroom is. I mean, really simple things like that. The body guy or gal is going to be very helpful in making the candidate's life easy. And candidates who are energized perform well. Candidates who are tired, hungry, drank too much are not good candidates. The body guy or gal is going to help make sure that the candidate is ready to perform. So that's why I hired one here, because I think it's that important. Also, I have a political director in this campaign, but notice I don't bring them on until July, because we're really not going to be doing a lot of political activities until later after August. But I'm getting him or her warmed up so that they're ready to hit the ground running at the end of August through the end of the campaign. I also have some regional field directors, and I've hired a volunteer coordinator to coordinate volunteers. In this very small campaign, I've accounted for payroll taxes, and I hired a treasurer and a compliance person, which actually can be the same person, to make sure that I'm not going to run afoul of the law and that I'm disclosing everything I need to the appropriate government agencies. All right, so that's the administrative budget. And the second part of that, well, that's part one of the administrative budgets. Here's part two. Are you going to have a headquarters? In this case, I'm not having a headquarters. I am going to have computer software. I'm going to buy a computer and fill it with software. I'm accounting for about $2,000 for that. And then I'm going to have office supplies, which kind of runs through the whole campaign, postage and delivery. I'm also going to have campaign-related travel, because in this district, there's gas, there's a lot of gas, a lot of food, sometimes overnights because the district's that big. And so I've accounted, I have a pretty good budget. It's almost $27,000, $26,500 for travel-related expenses. Most people forget this part and they wonder where all the money's going. Well, traveling is expensive, so keep that in mind. I have a $12,000 victory fund there, $12,000 for my election night reception party, hopefully. But I got to reserve that money to make sure that's paid for. And then I've got my yard signs and my swag or whatever. And I'm doing a photo shoot early, and then I'm going to do a refresh probably just right after summer. Hire a good photographer to take. But now, if you can get a volunteer photographer who knows how to take good pictures that tell a story, then go do that. Otherwise, hire someone who can take good pictures. Your image of yourself and the pictures that you share on your campaign must tell a story about you where people can relate to you. Not a driver's license photo, not a passport photo, but someone that tells your story. So family pictures, pictures of you active with the different organizations or volunteers, activities that you're associated with. And for yard signs, I've got them early. Got to buy them early, get ready to go, and then I'm gonna because cash flow, I'm gonna refresh and buy them later. I'm not gonna buy them all along the way because that's too expensive. But I'm gonna make a big investment at the beginning, and then I'm gonna make another investment later on instead of buying them all at once. I'm gonna save my resources. So that's what I'm doing here in this administrative budget. Now, this is the voter contact budget. So I'm doing direct mail in September and October. Why am I not doing it in August? Because people are not in the market for a candidate in August. They are in a market for a candidate in September and October. So I start pretty heavy in September, but then I really turn on the steam in October to make sure that people's mailboxes are full with my literature, with my candidate's message. And people predicted that direct mail will be dead because of thedigital, but it's actually stronger than ever because there's less competition in the mailbox. The mailbox is more empty now. So when people get mail, they actually can they're not sorting through much anymore. They're actually seeing it. And then I have a budget for over-the-top media, again in September and October, text messaging, but then goes through. Now, if you start any medium, make sure you can, once you start it, you can't stop it. You'll lose the momentum. You got to keep it going. So once you start the direct mail program, just keep it going and budget it out as far as you can. But make sure you work from election day backwards. Don't start mailing in April and then give them the summer off. That doesn't work. You got to mail them late. And if I had more money, I would start in August. And then the same with my text messaging. Once I start, don't stop. Once I do over-the-top advertising, start, don't stop. That's especially true with television because it's so expensive and you got to buy enough television to impact the message. So it would be useless to run a few ads in June and a few in July and a few everybody will forget. No one's watching. So I really want to make sure I have a lot of repetition in September and October, which is you can see in the buy there, 140 and 270. I've got almost like $400,000 just in the cable. Cable allows me to target, and then I got to produce those ads, so I got to do some shoots. I'm gonna do one in July. I could do it earlier. The closer you get to your advertising, the better it is. In other words, you don't want to do your shoots, put together your ads, and then all the subjects change or the campaign changes and your ads are no longer relevant. So you want to have it kind of close to where you're doing, then where you start advertising. And then you want to set some money aside because we might have to react to something, or we might have a closing message that we really got to get out. So we want to have enough money to do a reshoot if necessary, more in September or in October. Same with radio. Starting in late August, and I produced the ad. I'm producing the ads in August. Remember, I can produce a lot of ads in one production run, in one shoot run. Wardrobe changes for TV, and with radio, I can just record all the ads in one shot and then roll them out later. So that's what we're doing here. So we got 10,000 in September and 16,000 in October, and then we're going to run them right through election day. So it was $8,500. So it's $3,500 radio buy. And then again, with my door knockers and palm cards, I'm making an initial investment early on in April, and then again, I'm going to refresh in August and get ready for the closing. So those are going all the time. That's why there seems to be a gap, and there is, but you have them. It's not like television, texting, mail, where you just got to keep that momentum going. And here's a breakdown. This is in tab number 4. Now, This breakdown, if you enter data in this breakdown with the spreadsheet you're going to download, it will not update the voter contact budget. You'll have to take all of the totals that are in the dark purple here and translate them over to your budget. This is really a worksheet to help you get organized about, yes, I'm sending mail. Who am I sending it to? How much am I sending? How much does it cost? Where is it going to? And then that will give me my overall budget. So I've got, 5 mailers here, 3 over the top messages that are basically going out over and over again. And then I got like 7 different text messages. I got some social media. No, there's no social media advertising. Maybe that's a mistake. But it's there for you. Television, I'm not doing broadcast, but I am doing cable spots. There they are. Radio, I've got heavy radio, 5 different spots. I got 4 different spots that I've accounted for. And that's the breakdown of how much they cost. And that's what's reflected here. In this spreadsheet. All of this should be reflected here, but it doesn't connect, so you have to enter those yourself. This is just to help you get organized. And finally, the finance plan. Where's the money coming from? Well, my candidates chipped in $10,000 at the beginning, so the nice contribution. That helps me have a little cash flow to start out with. He's going to do a lot of candidate calls, and what I'm anticipating he'll be able to raise a little more than $90,000 by making those calls. Of course, most of the money is going to come in September or October. If you think it's going to come in May, June, and July, I'm just telling you from experience, it's just not, with rare exception. And then we're going to have a finance committee. They're going to raise about $53,000, or about half of what the candidate's going to make in their own calls. Those two teams have to work together, but the finance committee should on its own be able to raise about $50,000. And then he's got a house file. Now you'll notice I'm losing money in the house file in April and May, and that's because I'm prospecting. So I'm buying lists. They're cold to me, and so I don't know what the response is going to be. I'm anticipating I'm going to lose money. And so people sometimes ask, well, why would you do a mailing if you're going to lose money? Well, if I spend $10,000 on a mailing and only produce $5,000, I didn't lose $5,000. I bought a $5,000 asset that's going to pay for itself over and over and over again for $10,000. So at some point, that $10,000 will create $5,000, but it will create $5,000 again and again and again. So after 3 times, I should be able to turn a profit on that. And that's reflected here in October, where you see I'm raising $18,000, because we're building on the house file we already have, but we're prospecting in the beginning to make sure that we acquire more donors so we can have that $18,000 in October. Now, if you don't have a house file, you're not likely to build one by November. You could build it. I just wouldn't count on getting a lot of money. If you're an incumbent and you have a house file, then you're going to net profit out of it, because you've built it up over time, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it does take time to build. And in new candidates, it's very hard to make money on a house file. Then I've got my text messaging, my email, and similarly in fundraising, once you sort of start texting people for money, you kind of have to have a studied drumbeat. But remember, in September and October, it gets more urgent. People are more likely to give there, so there's a lot more text messaging going, and that's why I'm probably raising money. You're probably going to raise in September and October at least 2 to 3 times what you're going to raise anywhere before that. So October is the busiest month where most of the money comes in, but September really gets it going. And in this case, we have leadership committees. Those are other politicians who want me to vote for. I want our candidate to vote for them once they get elected for leader. So we have those, and then we have political action committees, which are special interest groups, and they're willing to give money because they're aligned with us. And so I've got $260,000 there, which is quite a lot of money. So we have the finance total here is $684,000. That's how much is being raised overall. You can see from the candidate and the finance committee, it's $154,000. Direct mail, $36,000. Digital is close to $60,000. Events are going to pull in about $15,000. I'm not doing telemarketing. Just a choice that we've made. And PACs and committees, about $385,000. Now, way over on the right, you can see what percentage of the money is coming in from where. So PACs and committees are almost 60% of my budget. And the candidate and finance committee is almost 24% of my budget. And then I have various amounts for the other groups. And that's what you really want to know. Now, all of this, you see this green down at the bottom where it says fundraising totals? All those numbers come from here, okay? And they're being plugged in. And then this spreadsheet here is the purple in this sheet here. And then my admin budget, which is these two sheets together, is all reflected right there in the admin budget. The first is human resources, which is represented by that sort of orangey brownish color there. And then under that is the operations plant and all the things that need to be paid for that aren't necessarily voter contact. And then we have a voter contact budget. Now look over on the right, all the way over on the right in the voter contact budget top line there, 78.91%. Is that in my target area? Yes, it is. My target area is 80%. So I've gotten pretty close to that, but I haven't gone down to 70%, which is the low. I'm at 70, almost 79%. This is a very good, strong voter contact budget, and admin altogether totaled represent about 21% of my total budget. So I'm in the 80-20. This is a good budget, right? And my fundraising is represented down below. Now, at the very top, all those numbers, of course, come from here. And then at the very top, you can see all these calculations come into effect. So if you look on the top right-hand corner, COH, that's cash on hand. And this candidate started with $32,500 already in the bank before we started this budget in March. So that's reflected in the March number. You see it's $41,900. So there's a little bit of, he put in $10,000. And then I got some expenses, so that's what we're netting, $41,950. That's my cash on hand at the beginning of March, and then from there I can determine what my monthly spend is. So you notice in the beginning it's very low. It's like less than 1%, or 1/10 of 1%, and then we get to April, it goes up to 2%. May a little more. June it goes down again. July. It goes up, and then notice in September and October. Why am I spending 30% of my budget in September? Because that's when voters are going to make up their mind. Why am I spending my almost half of my budget in October? Because that's when voters are making up their mind. And then a little bit because we got 5 days in November. So that makes up 100% of my spend percentage by month. And then I have fundraising by month as a percentage of overall fundraising. How much am I raising? You'll notice I'm raising 34% of my budget in September and 42% of it in October. And then I've got my burn rate, right? You notice my burn rate. See, if I kept a burn rate in April of 535%, I would go broke fast, right? So I got to get that down, and it does go down. And then we have the bottom line, the cash on hand. If that number goes red or negative, I got to be really careful. Now, it's okay to go in the red a few $100s or $1,000, but if you're like $24,000 in the red, you're not going to make payroll. You're not going to be able to pay your ad. If you have TV, you got to pay in advance. They won't put your ad on unless you pay for it. They're not going to drop your mailer unless you pay for it. So make sure that number is a healthy number and that stays in the black. All right, so we got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to turn it back over to Eiley to wrap up, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please download the shared documents, and we hope to see you at an in-person Advanced School of Politics political event soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you again for your presentation. We saw a lot of questions in the chat. If you have any questions about his presentation, we expand on this entire presentation throughout the Campaign Leadership College. Rick, if you don't mind going back to the PowerPoint so they can see the codes again. Just a reminder, the Conservative Organizational Entrepreneurship School will be this month on the 23rd and the 24th. We will send you the PowerPoint slides with the links to these schools. Unfortunately, we do not send out PowerPoints as a department with everything that we cover today. If you attend our programs, we give you comprehensive workbooks that showcase all of these PowerPoints where you can take notes and you can get everything that you need. So we will send you guys all that information. And again, if there's anything that you need or you need to revisit this video, we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. Emily has been very gracious in posting our link tree. So the YouTube will be on there. And if you have any other further questions or you'd like to connect with our team, you can email me, eplumley@leadershipinstitute.org, and I'm happy to help y'all out. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for coming. And we're happy to keep this going. So thank you.